I guess the reason I'm sharing this here is because my situation and actions prevent me from fully disclosing to those close to me. On December 1st, I received the news I had been dreading. The tests confirmed that I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer, so this will be my last holiday season. I've come to terms with it, and I'm at peace with what's to come. I've lived a fulfilling life, and I know my loved ones will be taken care of. Since I am a private person, my wayward wife, Jane, is unaware of my tests. I didn't want to worry her until I had answers, so I decided to go home early to have the talk. It's not something I want to do over the phone or through text. Well, as you can probably guess, my life changed even more that afternoon. When I arrived at the house, I noticed one of my business partner's car in the driveway. It was flashy and expensive, with a personalized license plate. This was completely unexpected and unusual. I checked the home camera system on my phone and realized it was in privacy mode, not recording, so I decided to leave it as it was and drove off to my farm property. Now, our camera system is primarily for safety purposes, and I rarely check it unless there's a reason for concern. However, I also enjoy using the outside cameras to observe wildlife and watch storms passing through. Just for my own satisfaction, I set up a separate video recorder years ago to store the camera footage locally. I don't have access to that storage on my phone, so when I was at the farm, I turned on my computer and accessed the other server to confirm what my instincts were telling me. And sure enough, there they were on the recordings, snuggling in the living room, enjoying wine, dancing, and then heading to the bedroom suite. It seems they left the doors open because the microphone picked up their activities after they moved out of the camera's view. Considering the limited time I have left, I wanted to find answers. You can call me whatever you want, but all the devotion and love I had for her vanished that afternoon. I'm experiencing a range of emotions as one would expect. I know that I am not at fault. I've been a loyal, romantic, and attentive partner. Now I'm shifting my focus to myself. I've reevaluated what matters most to me. So I reached out to my lawyer and we went over my will and the prenuptial agreement. I shared with him the situation at hand. We delved into understanding the duration and extent of this affair. The discoveries have been unsettling, and it's either that I never truly knew the woman I spent over 2 decades of my life with, or something within her has changed. For now, I've decided not to say anything to my children. My wife and I never had kids, or my wife. I'm going to put on a brave face and navigate through the holiday season. I want to create lasting memories with my children and grandchildren. I'll play the role of a loving father and grandfather and then attempt to maintain the facade of a devoted husband. Let me give you some background to address some common questions. The affair partner is a widower and is not remarried. While he is a business partner, we are not friends in the traditional sense. I prefer not to mix business with personal relationships. It's worth mentioning that I never married the mother of my twins, M and F. It was her decision, and I fully agree with her that it was the right choice at that time. When my kids were 7, their mother, Sarah, married a wonderful man named Steve. Sarah and Steve didn't have children together. However, when my kids were 3, I had a wake-up call and became actively involved in their lives, striving to be the father I always wanted to be. Sarah and I co-parented well, and I consider Steve a friend. We're all in our 60s now, while Jane, my wife, is almost 60. AP is in his 50s. Both Jane and I are in our first marriage, and we tied the knot in our 30s. Sarah and I were young when we had the twins, and although they were a surprise, we always wanted them. Now the twins are in their 40s, and we have teenage and older grandkids. Every year, our Christmas celebration lasts for a whole week. We gather on the farm, and once everyone is here, we head out to cut down a tree. We decorate, cook, play, and enjoy the festivities as a family. Sarah and Steve have been part of this tradition since I purchased the farm. I've made a decision to keep the situation to myself until after the new year. If I were to tell Sarah, she wouldn't be able to keep it a secret. I don't want to put Steve in a position where he has to lie to his wife. Right now, my focus is on ensuring that the kids and grandkids have a joyful week together. During this week, Jane's presence will be a minor detail in the grand scheme of things. To be honest, I don't really care about her as much as I care about the rest of the family. The financial aspect is quite intriguing. Jane and I met and got married when we were both well established in our careers and financially secure. She had a good job with an excellent pension plan. On top of that, she had received 2 inheritances that were placed in a trust. From the beginning, we agreed not to disclose our entire net worth to each other, mainly because she insisted on it. We also have a prenuptial agreement that states any property or trust established before our marriage, as well as any income generated from those assets, is not considered shared property. Again, this was at her insistence. Now, I am the one providing both properties, including housing and utilities. I cover the expenses for travel, food, and fuel. Essentially, I support her entirely. As for her income and wealth, she spends it on herself. She buys her own car, clothes, takes personal trips, and even gets cosmetic surgeries. On the outside, she may appear beautiful, but her actions have revealed her ugly side. A few days after receiving my diagnosis, I made the decision to retire from the nonprofit organization. Once I announced it, I noticed that Jane seemed a bit uneasy. I can understand why. With my retirement, I'll be around more often. Tomorrow will be my last day of work, and from then on, I'll be focusing on spending time with my family. I shared the camera server information with my lawyer and gave him access from his office. So I don't know if they had any more activities, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did. At this point, I honestly don't care anymore. I know who I am and what I'm worth, and this other person, AP, is a significant downgrade. Despite AP's flashy lifestyle, I prefer to keep things low-key. I drive a 15-year-old pickup truck, enjoy wearing jeans, t-shirts, and coveralls in the winter. What I do know is that AP doesn't possess anywhere near the wealth that Jane believes he does. How do I know? Well, since the trust has invested in his business, I receive quarterly financial reports. I don't disclose the exact amount of my wealth to anyone except my accountants. But let's just say that the trust has been growing for the past 30 years. I live a modest life, and there's enough there for my great-great-grandchildren to enjoy the farm and have their education taken care of. Once Jane realizes what she's lost, it will be her own reckoning. I just won't be there to witness it. December has been quite busy with our usual social engagements on the weekends. AP was present at one of the parties, and it was tough not to keep an eye on Jane and him. I don't think I was caught. With all the busyness and wrapping things up at work, I've managed to hold myself together more easily. Jane hasn't shown any signs that she knows I'm aware of the truth. It's not something I'm proud of, but I still sleep in the same bed. I've been selfish with her lately, feeling like I'm using her. However, it turns out she's been using me for a significant part of this year. I'm not as honorable as some of you may think, and I despise this small amount of deceit. So please don't worry about Jane getting everything, because she won't. The trust is in capable hands, and I've provided detailed instructions on how it should be managed. I've made plans in case my health deteriorates sooner than expected, or if I pass away unexpectedly. I've also made arrangements for in-home care when it becomes necessary, but Jane will not be my caregiver. If I become unable to make decisions, the lawyer will inform Sarah, Steve, and the kids while blocking Jane from contacting me. All important documents, valuable items, and such have been relocated to a secure place. Lastly, I've begun writing letters to each family member, including Jane, and it's been more challenging than I anticipated. Update. Mission accomplished. We had an amazing drama-free holiday week, and I've successfully made it to 2023. Here are my observations about WW and this week. Honestly, I think this is the first time she's stepped out and had an affair. Her being with all of us this entire week seems to have taken a toll on her. It's funny how things start to make more sense when you know something is going on. She was being secretive with her phone, frequently stepping out of our family gatherings to get some air. The best part was when she claimed she needed to run into town, and one of the grandkids wanted to join. The way she twisted and turned to avoid taking the grandkid with her was something to behold. I have to admit, I played along a bit by asking why she couldn't take them. So the affair is still ongoing. Now that I'm retired, she's asking me about my plans for the day or week. I go ahead and tell her, and then I ask her about her plans. Later this week, I'll suggest meeting up for lunch since we'll be in the same area according to our plans, just to mess with her. I guess it's true what someone said in another post. Unpredictability is the cheater's worst enemy. This morning, I had a meeting with my lawyer. I made some decisions and asked him to prepare the necessary documents. I replaced my temporary will with a new permanent will, which has been signed and should not need any further changes. In anticipation of everything going haywire, I had him draw up divorce papers based on the prenup and the evidence of the affair. According to those papers, she will receive nothing except for 25% of our shared assets, which mainly include household items and furniture. I will keep all of my liquid assets, retirement funds, and things I purchase with my own money. If I push it, she will also be required to pay alimony. I have signed the papers and put together a packet containing all the evidence of the affair, which I am keeping in case I decide to use it. I have sold my loan to the trust, and I will allow the trustees to convert it into shares in AP's company. Speaking of the trust, I have made a decision on how I want it to be managed. I will step down as a trustee and become a 1% trustee. The majority of the trusteeship will go to the twins, and the remaining portion will be given to the 4 grandkids. Sarah and Steve will act as proxies for all the grandkids. Once each of the kids reaches the age of 24, the trusteeship will be transferred from Sarah and Steve to the respective grandkid. If there's a remaining fraction, Sarah will receive the additional share, vote, or value. I've scheduled a meeting with the kids, Sarah and Steve, for next week. I plan on disclosing everything to them at that time. They will need to sign documents, and it's only fair that they understand why I am making these changes. Once this process is completed, my personal worth will consist of my liquid assets, personal belongings, and the money from AP's loan. Even in the worst-case scenario, Jane will receive very little compared to the assets and value held in the trust. Over the next few weeks, I will distribute the few personal items that I want to pass on to the kids and grandkids. Those items are already stored in a secure location accessible by my lawyer. Well, just to be clear, I'm not putting up a fight against my condition. I'm letting nature take its course. Thankfully, I haven't experienced any negative side effects from treatments. However, I did notice that I've been getting tired more easily this week, and my family has also picked up on it. I brushed it off as a sign of me getting older, just playing the role of the typical old man. The persistent cough I have is what initially raised concerns and led to the diagnosis of lung tumors. I passed it off as a lingering cough. Once other complications arise, I anticipate a rapid decline in my health. But by that time, everyone will be aware of the situation. I appreciate all the well wishes regarding that aspect. My plan is to cherish the time I have with my family. Planning a big trip that accommodates everyone's schedules would be challenging. That's why this week was so important to me. It was the last opportunity for me to spend an extended period of time with all of them together. I'm considering a small trip for myself, but we'll see. My next goal is to dedicate a day to spend one-on-one time with each of my children and grandchildren. Update. Today, I had my lawyer, a notary, the twins, Sarah and Steve, come to my farm. We completed the tasks I needed to get done. Surprisingly, this whole process went as smoothly as it possibly could have. It's understandable that the family is feeling hurt and angry. As soon as everyone arrived and saw my lawyer and the notary, the tension in the room was palpable. I asked them to take a seat and listen to what I had to say. Once I finished speaking, they were to sign the papers. After that, I would address any questions they had. They were all aware of the trust's existence. I explained to them that it was time for me to relinquish control of the trust and hand it over to them. I emphasized how significant the trust had been in my life and why I had established it. I clarified that it was separate from my marriage to Jane and that it was a mutual decision. I also provided instructions on how I wanted them to manage and utilize the trust. We discussed how the trust would be divided between the twins and the grandchildren, with Sarah and Steve holding equal proxy votes for the grandkids, until each of them turns 25. They showed their trust in me by signing and notarizing the documents. Once that was completed, we made copies, and I escorted my lawyer and the notary out. I expressed my gratitude for their willingness to come on a Sunday, and they were both gracious as always. When I returned to the dining room, which had turned into a makeshift conference room, everyone was silent. It was my daughter who broke the silence with a question, or rather, a series of questions and thoughts all at once. As soon as she finished, I began talking about my health. I disclosed my diagnosis and listened as they started discussing plans on how to fight this battle. However, I interrupted them at that point. I explained the odds and informed them that I had already sought a second opinion. Then I shared with them what all of you already know. I have made the decision not to pursue treatment. I have chosen to let nature take its course. We spent the next hour to an hour and a half arguing back and forth. At times, my daughter even left the room, and Sarah had to go fetch her. During those moments, my son Steve and I had a sincere and open conversation. They may not fully agree with me, but they do understand where I'm coming from. We reached a consensus that Sarah and my daughter will eventually come to terms with the situation. Once things calmed down a bit, I knew the inevitable question was coming. They wanted to know when I found out about my diagnosis. So I shared the timeline with them, which led to another wave of anger and sadness. I explained that I wanted to have one more holiday week where I wasn't seen as a dead man walking. I admitted that it was selfish of me, but I didn't want this diagnosis to overshadow their future holiday memories. My daughter, sensing there was more to the story, assumed the role of a detective. She refused to leave the room until all the details were out. She questioned how on earth Jane kept this information from her. That's when I revealed the final bombshell. I recounted the exact same events as I did in my initial post. That was the first time I truly saw the fire of anger in my daughter's eyes. I then revealed to them that Jane still has no clue that I'm aware of her affair. I basically addressed the same questions and concerns that all of you had suggested. I must say, you all prepared me well for this conversation. Ultimately, I expressed to them that I value their presence in my life far more than I do Jane's. All I want now is to spend the remainder of my days in peace, free from any worries about Jane. I had to explain my actions during the holiday week to them. They also put together the pieces of Jane stepping outside for fresh air and her reluctance to bring the grandkid along on the trip into town. They were concerned that I went through all of this alone. I reassured them that I had support from some friends on social media who helped me get through the toughest moments. However, I refused to disclose the details of where and how I received that support. They can learn about it later, but for now, I still need this space for myself. The emotions were really intense, and we've been talking on and off as a group for a few hours, but I told them I needed to shift the focus back to the trust. They understand that the trust will play a crucial role in preventing Jane from getting her hands on my hard-earned wealth. It serves as protection for them. That's why she's not part of this meeting. Having said that, I then proceeded to share the financial details of the trust. I'm pretty sure they all viewed the trust as a way to avoid taxes or simply safeguard assets in a marriage where the children are from another woman. They weren't prepared for me to disclose the financials. As I started going through the assets and balance sheets, the room fell silent. Then came the question, why did you work so hard all those years when you had this much? I explained my personal philosophy on managing finances, something they've heard from me many times and deeply value. But I also told them that I've been living off the trust all these years. It allowed me to support them through college. It provided me with the freedom to prioritize time with them. And it even enabled me to work for a nonprofit organization essentially for free, thanks to the trust. If there's one example I want to leave behind for them and their children, it's to use this trust to make a positive impact on others, not just by writing occasional checks to charities, but by actively working for causes they genuinely believe in. In my time working with this nonprofit, I've accomplished much more through training others and building relationships than simply writing a check could ever achieve. I'm not happy that today everyone's lives at that table were affected in various ways, both positive and negative, because of me. It didn't happen the way I wanted it to, but it's done. They know everything now. I've begged and pleaded with them to let me handle Jane, not to discuss the trust with anyone. We'll maintain the status quo for now. When my health worsens, things will change. They all agreed to this. We spent the next few hours cooking a meal, talking, crying, laughing, and breaking into smaller groups. They all left about an hour ago, but I expect the twins to return. I know they'll share what's happening with their spouses. That's just how they are. And I truly love my two in-laws' children. Update. I had a surprise visit from one of my wife's friends, Carol. She's around the same age as Jane, and they were together last week for a girls' night at Carol's house. Jane came home very drunk last week. She used a ride share. Carol has been a longtime friend of my wife, and interestingly, wife seems to have forgotten that I introduced them. Carol's parents were friends with my parents. Well, it seems that my unpredictable behavior has contributed to wayward wife's instability. During last week's girls' night, Jane reached a breaking point. She was so drunk that she ended up confiding in Carol about her affair. Apparently, she just kept talking and didn't stop, despite Carol's attempts to intervene. Carol got really angry with her. As Carol kept condemning Jane, she continued to defend her actions and share more and more details. The next day, Carol reached out to Jane. Jane didn't remember anything from the previous night, so Carol filled her in on what she had confessed. However, Jane completely denied having an affair and claimed that Carol was mistaken and making things up. In response, Carol called her out on it and gave her a week to come clean, or else she would tell me herself. Since Jane continued to deny everything, I had a chance to meet with Carol. We sat down over coffee, and Carol gave me a condensed version of Jane's confession. She was expecting me to be devastated, but I surprised her by telling her that I already knew. I asked her if anyone else was present when Jane made her confession, and it turned out that Carol was the only one in the house at the time. I then asked if she had told anyone else about it. Carol was offended by the question and assured me that she wouldn't spread something like that without telling me first. I apologized for my suspicion and explained that I had my own timeline for dealing with Jane, and involving others would complicate things. Carol understood and was sympathetic. I asked Carol to do me a favor and not mention anything to anyone, allowing Jane to believe that she believes her. Carol agreed to the first request, but felt uneasy about the second part. I asked her to give it a try and assured her that I would be okay. Carol said she's there for anything else I need. Just let her know. I know I'll have to apologize again when Carol finds out about my health, but that's something I'll handle another day. Tomorrow, I'm planning to confront Jane. We have our regular date night, and during that time, I intend to calmly tell her what I know about my condition and how I plan to spend the rest of my life without her. I hope that being in a public setting will minimize any dramatic reactions. Whether it goes according to plan or turns into a total disaster, I'll provide an update sometime this weekend. After the confrontation, my plan is to share with her what I know and ask her not to contact me or my family. We'll see how it unfolds. Update. Jane and I have our weekly date night, and we usually go to the same restaurant. We've even established a regular table there. It's towards the back, still part of the public space, but away from the lively atmosphere near the bar. I decided that this would be the perfect place to confront her, and I plan to do it after we finish dessert. I got my lawyer's reservation at the same time. Before we even started our meal, I discreetly paid for both our parties' meals and informed our longtime server about it. I had Carol on standby, ready to assist Jane after I left. My plan was to conclude the meal with a conversation about our relationship, which I intended to record. Then, I would confront Jane, share with her what I knew about her actions, reveal my diagnosis, and explain my plan for the future while giving her a letter requesting that she refrain from contacting me or my family and visiting the farm. I wanted to make sure the letter was witnessed. Additionally, I planned to leave her a briefcase filled with evidence and the divorce papers. Afterward, I would simply get up and walk away. I expected her to avoid making a scene to protect her social status. I made sure to record our conversation. Jane expressed how wonderful our relationship has been throughout the years. She praised our teamwork and how great we are together. I then asked her if I've treated her well and if I've ever mistreated or hurt her in any way. She responded with a definite no. Next, I confronted her about why she cheated on me. She claimed ignorance about what Carol may have told me and insisted that Carol was mistaken. I informed her that I had already known about her infidelity, even before Carol mentioned it. In that moment, it seemed like Jane's prepared defenses crumbled, and her face lost its color. All she could do was ask, "What?" I asked her to let me speak without interruption, and she nodded in agreement, visibly shaken. The confident and proud woman she was moments ago seemed to transform into someone startled, like a deer caught in headlights. All she could do was nod in response to what I had to say. Then I explained how I hurried home after my appointment with the doctor, knowing I had to have the toughest conversation with the one person I needed to talk to. I described how, upon arriving, I noticed his car parked outside. I checked the surveillance cameras and saw that they were set to privacy mode. That's when I made the decision to head to the farm. I assured her that I still had video evidence, and she was about to interrupt with a question on how, but I raised my hand to signal her to let me finish. I proceeded to reveal my diagnosis and my decision not to fight the illness. I saw the sadness in her eyes, and it frustrated me. How could she feel sorry for me? Nevertheless, I carried on. I then motioned to the waitress, who went over and fetched my lawyer. Both of them joined us at the table. My lawyer handed me a briefcase and a folder containing a letter. I told her that I didn't want her to reach out to me or my family or come to the farm after I left that night. I signed the letter and asked the server to witness it. The server and lawyer stood witness as I handed the letter to Jane, and then I thanked and dismissed them. Afterward, I gave the briefcase to Jane, making it clear that I knew far more than she anticipated. I shared my devastation and revealed that the briefcase contained divorce papers already signed by me, which she could sign to initiate the divorce process. I explained that I didn't expect to survive a contested divorce and that she could continue staying at our home in town as long as I'm alive. Meanwhile, I would be at the farm, and I emphasized that I wouldn't be seeing her after tonight. I made it clear that I didn't want to hear any excuses and informed Jane that I had called Carol to assist her in getting home. True to her character, Jane maintained her composure in public. She managed to utter a quick but I reminded her that I was leaving and that I was done. I approached the server and left her a generous tip, then sought out the owner of the restaurant to apologize for not giving him a heads up about the situation. As I made my way out, I noticed my son standing by the door with Carol. Carol passed by me with a brief smile, but her eyes showed concern for Jane. My son retrieved my truck, and his wife drove me to the farm. On Friday night, my son and his wife stayed with me until midnight. Eventually, I convinced them to go home. As I went to sleep, a sense of relief washed over me, but I also felt a renewed sense of loss. Despite that, I was able to accomplish the task I needed to do. On Saturday, the family gathered at the farm to check up on me and make sure I was doing okay. I must admit, I felt a bit pampered, but it turned out to be a good day. However, in the afternoon, Carol paid me a visit. She informed me that Jane had fallen apart on Friday night and apparently contacted her affair partner on Saturday. During their conversation, Jane realized that she had been used by the affair partner and was in a terrible state. Carol made it clear that Jane didn't ask her to reach out to me, but she believes that if I were to talk to Jane for a little while, it could give her the strength to keep herself out of my life. Carol knows how to make her requests in a way that resonates with me. Reluctantly, I agreed to have a 2-hour discussion with Jane at the farm. I made it clear that I would have someone there to support me, and Jane could choose someone to be there for her as well. The intention was to have a civilized conversation, where I wouldn't tolerate being blamed, minimized, or have the blame shifted onto me. The purpose of this meeting was for Jane to find answers on how to move forward. This morning, we had the meeting. Jane decided to bring Carol along. I'm not sure why, maybe for damage control, and I chose my daughter to be by my side. I wanted the atmosphere to be as comfortable as possible for Jane, so we wouldn't have to go through this ordeal again. I entered the meeting with a clear direction and the goal of removing Jane from my life once and for all. The meeting went exactly as I anticipated. Jane cried, apologized, and tried to downplay the affair. I wasn't buying any of it. I made it clear that she would have a place to live until I pass away, but the decision about the house would be in the hands of the trustees. I explained that she wouldn't receive anything from my estate or the trust. However, She has her six-figure pension and her own trust, so she'll be fine financially. I need to vent about something. She had the audacity to ask, "Why won't you fight for me or our relationship?" I was on the verge of losing my temper, but I held myself back and simply replied, "I just don't care about you or our relationship anymore." That really hit her hard. Let me vent my anger here. This is the mindset of a selfish cheater. They only care about themselves. Even after ruining someone's life, they still expect that person to fight for them. Screw that. I wasn't worth fighting for against her own desires and greed. Screw her. Sorry for the rant. Jane got the answer she wanted, but looking back, she probably didn't actually want them. I don't want any more meetings. They just distract me from what I need to do. Jane and Carol left, but Carol came back a couple of hours later. We had a quick chat. It turns out the other person involved in the affair received a notice from the trustees. They're planning to convert the loan into shares of his company. Since the trust will be the majority owner, they're requesting a thorough forensic audit. My daughter, who has an MBA, wasted no time in taking action. Well, it seems that when Jane sought comfort from him, she realized what I already suspected. He was using her to see if she could buy the loan from me. There were some offhand comments in the recordings that made me suspicious of his intentions. Now, with the paperwork filed, him knowing that I sold the loan to the trust and Jane no longer in my life, she's no longer useful to him, and he made that clear to her. It turns out Jane also shared with Carol that her trust fund has run out. She'll only have her pension income to rely on. She believed life with AP would be more glamorous than with me. She genuinely thinks he's wealthier than I am. He drives fancy cars, dines at upscale restaurants, flies first class, while my husband works on his farm, drives an old truck, and we fly economy. She had been planning to divorce me when he expressed his eternal love and desire to marry her. It sickens me to see how greedy and shallow she is. I won't be around to witness it, but I expect my family will let her know how much I was worth after I'm gone. I'm grateful that her true colors were revealed now, so I could deal with her and spare my family from her. Then Carol surprised me with something completely unexpected, catching me off guard. She told me that since I'm no longer tied down, if I ever need companionship, I should give her a call. I questioned her, wondering why any woman would want to spend time with me given my diagnosis. I thought there was nothing long-term to offer. She replied that just because Jane was ignorant and didn't appreciate what she had, it doesn't mean that other divorced or widowed women wouldn't be lining up to spend the time I have left with me. She insisted that I'm an incredible man, and any time spent with me would be treasured. According to her, there would be plenty of women eager to be in my company, and she might as well be first in line. I raised a concern, saying, "But most of them won't know that Jane and I are separated, right?" She assured me that Jane doesn't want the social circles to know, but she and Sarah would make sure the truth gets out. I thanked her politely and said I would consider it. She smiled and gave me a kiss on the cheek. After she left, I pondered the offer, but I'm pretty sure I don't want that kind of complication in my life right now. Overall, I'm doing okay. It's been a wild ride to say the least. Right now, I just need a few days of peace and quiet. Soon enough, the social circles will find out about both the end of my marriage and my diagnosis. Then I'll have a never-ending flow of people sending me their well wishes. I knew I couldn't avoid it forever, but I don't want to be treated differently. However, life is what it is. Update. Let's talk about Jane. She's disappeared from the scene. Her reputation in the community has taken a nosedive. Once people found out about her actions, she was politely pushed to step down from her leadership positions. Her social circle has been pretty harsh on her, openly questioning if she pursued their husbands. She's made a few attempts to reach out to me, but I haven't responded. A couple of times it was through intermediaries. I simply asked the person to let her know that I've said everything I needed to say and that I know all I need to know. I honestly don't care if she's seeking closure. Why should I be concerned about her selfish need for that? She knows exactly how I feel because I made it clear to her. Some of the details of the affair. It lasted for at least 6 months, during which they went on 3 trips together. On one trip, they acted like newlyweds. On another, they celebrated a 20-year wedding anniversary. And on the last one, they coincidentally stayed at the same hotel. It seems like role-playing was part of their dynamic. She chose to use my house because she felt comfortable there. Plus, it's secluded from the road, making it hard for people to see the cars in the driveway. She even bought herself a second car and kept it in a town parking garage. When she visited the AP's house, she would swap cars so that no one would recognize her vehicle. She was really worried about how people in her social circle would perceive all of this, maybe to avoid getting caught by me. Her actions alone demonstrate the great lengths she went to for this affair. These efforts only strengthen my convictions about how I feel and how I handled the situation. I have no regrets about what I've done. The drunken confession to Carol wasn't solely because of my unpredictable behavior. It turns out that as soon as the trust received the notice about me selling AP's loan, he started distancing himself from Jane. I guess the pressure of almost getting caught and AP losing interest in her made Jane get drunk and spill everything to Carol. You can imagine what happened next. To me, it's pretty obvious that AP had ulterior motives for being involved in the affair. But that doesn't excuse Jane even a little bit. It just makes her even more pathetic. It seems like AP wanted Jane's help with his loan from me, and Jane wanted a lavish lifestyle with AP's money. It's interesting how two unscrupulous people are drawn to each other. If all of us decent folks let the despicable ones pair up, maybe we can find better partners. I apologize to those who believe in working on reconciliation out of loyalty. It just wasn't the right path for me. AP is pretty unhappy about my daughter's intentions, and it seems like he'll try to stop her in court. The only thing he stands to lose is more money. I've heard rumors that he's been trying to gather funds from other investors to pay off the loan, but unfortunately for him, news of his actions has already started circulating among my business contacts. Remember when I said it's about investing in individuals, not just companies? Well, there aren't many people interested in investing in him. I'm not sure what my daughter has planned for his company, but it employs a decent number of people, so she'll work hard to ensure its continuity for their sake. I think she's concerned that AP might have something shady going on in the company's financial records. For the sake of the employees, I hope it's nothing that can't be fixed. Update. I'm still here, but it's been a bit tough. I'm back home now, but I did spend a few days in the hospital. I was found unconscious, but thankfully I was still breathing, so they took me to the ER. Even though I have a do not resuscitate order, I never actually passed. I've always had a strong dislike for hospitals, but now with my diagnosis, I really hate being there. I don't want my life to end in that place. I've been back home for a while now, but I can no longer drive off the farm. They don't want me driving even on the farm. But I'm determined to keep doing my chores and enjoying the beauty of the sunrise and sunset for as long as I can. I also have full-time home healthcare workers, or as I jokingly call them, babysitters. But I don't want to argue with my family about that decision. Basically, I don't remember anything until I woke up in the hospital. Most of my family and Carol were in the room with me. By that time, I was stable, and the doctors just wanted to observe me for a day or two and run more tests to be certain. Throughout almost the entire time, I had either one of my twins, Sarah, or Carol by my side. There was one night when nobody was with me, and I woke up to find Jane in my room. I guess she pulled the wife card on a duty nurse that did not know not to let her in. I was tired, but she put on a show, acting sweet and devoted. I have no idea why, but when I realized she was holding my hand and stroking my head, I pulled away. She was hurt by that. Then she started apologizing, saying she didn't mean the things she said to him, that she was just using him, and so on. I just sat there without responding. That upset her even more, and she demanded that I talk to her. She raised her voice just enough to get the nurse's attention. The nurse noticed Jane's behavior and my discomfort. The nurse handled it smoothly. She told Jane to wait outside because she needed to perform some routine checks. Once Jane was out of the room and the door was closed, the nurse asked me if I was okay. I explained to her that Jane is my ex-wife, and there should be notes in my file stating that she is not allowed to visit. The nurse apologized and asked me what she could do to minimize my stress. I asked her to call my emergency contacts. She did, and about 45 minutes later, Sarah, my daughter, and Carol walked into the room. By that time, Jane had returned but was speaking quietly, still spewing her nonsense. Once Jane saw them, she knew it was time to leave. I calmly asked her to just go, explaining that the other patients didn't deserve her causing a scene. I asked her to stop thinking about herself and just leave. I'm grateful that she left quietly, but before she did, she quickly kissed me on the forehead. I pulled back a bit, but if I have to endure that for the sake of peace for the other patients, so be it. The women in my life were sincerely sorry and apologized to me. Honestly, I can't hold it against them. They have their own lives to attend to. They all worked out a schedule to ensure that I wouldn't be left alone again. I'm sure my daughter thanked the nurse for contacting them while also expressing her anger towards the staff for allowing Jane in despite clear instructions not to. This whole incident just reinforces the fact that Jane is desperate and grasping for anything. I'm not someone special to her. She only sees me as a means to stay afloat. Every time I interact with Jane, I can see how dark and empty her soul truly is. AP is still the same moron he always was. His accounting department has caught on to what's happening, and in meetings with my daughter, they pretty much spilled the beans. There's no evidence of criminal behavior on AP's part in his business. It's clear that he was taking advantage of every perk and loophole to boost his income at the expense of the company's bottom line. So when my daughter takes charge, she's going to slash his stake in the company by 60%, and that really gets under his skin. I have a feeling she might even just straight up fire him and relegate him to a silent minority owner position. So his extravagant lifestyle is about to come crashing down. He's been threatening lawsuits, but hasn't taken any action yet. I think his credit and reputation in the area are completely ruined. Carol has become a regular presence in my life, and I must admit, I enjoy her company and companionship. Maybe she's slowly winning me over. She's been staying over at my place several days a week. I hope to recover quickly, but since I can't drive anymore, I'll have to rely on others more. It's a new experience for me. Carol has enthusiastically offered to help me out in this regard. And just to address any assumptions, no, there's nothing romantic happening between us, apart from sitting closely together. Update. My dad passed away last week. I've been reading his posts and comments whenever I get the chance in the past few days. I can hear his voice so clearly in his words. One thing he asked was for me to deliver a letter to you from him. To my Reddit family, well, if you're reading this letter, it means my time here is coming to an end. As many of you suggested, I wrote letters and made videos for all of my family members. While interacting with your posts, I started referring to you all as my Reddit family. That got me thinking that I should write one final letter to all of you. I want to express my gratitude for your support and advice. This brief period of time has been incredibly meaningful to me and will undoubtedly have a lasting impact on my family even after I'm gone. You have helped me accomplish my final gift to myself and my family. One last Christmas week together. Without this platform to share my thoughts and receive support, I would have had to rely solely on my family, which would have meant giving up on my goal. My family might not yet see it as a gift, but they will in the future. I can't express enough how much I enjoyed creating those little videos. Thanks to all of you, my family will have another small piece of me. I wouldn't have made any of those silly videos without your suggestions and encouragement. Honestly, I wouldn't have even thought of it on my own. I have one request for all of you. My family will be going through a range of emotions. I understand that by sharing my story, you all want closure, but please respect their need to grieve and keep the requests for updates to a minimum. I've asked them to share this letter with you, and if they feel comfortable, to provide a final update on Jane. Whether they choose to do so is entirely up to them. I've made the request, and I kindly ask for your patience in this matter. Lastly, I want to send my best wishes to all of you. I'll be sending all the love I can from the great beyond. Remember that none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. Stay true to yourself and be kind to those around you. I hope none of you have to endure the same struggles I faced, but if you do, know that I'll be there to support you in any way I can. Each and every one of you is incredibly valuable, so never let anyone make you believe otherwise. I'll be sending virtual hugs from wherever I end up. Expressing gratitude sometimes feels insufficient, but it's the best I can do right now. Thank you. I hope we'll meet again in the afterlife. Just not too soon.